So, hi everyone, my name is Dhia BEDOUI. I'm a Microsoft 365 and SharePoint developer based in France. I'm originally from Tunisia, and today I'm presenting AnimPage Motion, which is a custom SPFx part that brings configurable animation to modern SharePoint pages. So the goal is to improve the user experience with motion effects while keeping the solution configurable, lightweight, and safe for existing page content. So let us start with the problem I wanted to address. So modern SharePoint pages are often used to publish important information, internal communication, dashboards, or landing pages, but in many cases, all the content appears at the same time. The information is available, but visually the page can feel static and flat. So the goal of motion here is not animation for decoration. It's not about adding some effects everywhere. The goal is to guide attention. So motion can help user understand where to look first. It can create a better rhythm when scrolling through the page on SharePoint, and it can make the experience feel a little bit more modern and polished. So, but there's a balance to keep in mind. Animations must stay subtle, controlled, and optional. If they are overused, it can become distracting. So the main idea here is motion should support the content and not compete with it. With that in mind, let me explain what AnimPage Motion does from the page author's point of view. So AnimPage Motion is a page-level SPFx part. From a functional point of view, it lets SharePoint page authors add motions effects to existing web parts on the page. And the important point is that the target web parts do not need to be changed or any special configuration. There's no need to modify their code or rebuild them or create a custom page template. So the author simply adds the AnimPage Motion to the page, opens the property pane, and configures animation for the existing content or web parts. For each target web part, the author can enable or disable the animation, choose an animation style that he would like to apply, configure a delay, and decide whether the animation should run once every time the user scrolls. So the value is really for page author. They can improve the page experience directly inside SharePoint without asking developers to modify every existing component. Now that we have seen the functional idea, let's look briefly at how it works internally. So technically, the implementation is split into a few simple responsibilities. First, the web part needs to understand what exists on the current SharePoint page. For that, I use the service called Page Scanner Service. So the service loads the current modern page using PMPJS, client-side page form file, and then it reads the page structure, sections, columns, controls. And from this page model, the web part extracts a simplified list of available web parts on the page, including information like the web part ID, title, sections, and then based on this list, the property pane is generated dynamically. So each detected web part becomes a configurable item. And at runtime, when an animation is enabled for a target specific web part, so AnimPage Motion finds the corresponding rendering element on the page using the SharePoint web part instance identifier. And then there is a service reveal on scroll service. It takes over. It uses the intersection observer to detect when the element enters or leaves the viewport on the page. So when elements enter the viewport, the service applies CSS class to reveal it with the selected animation preset. So the core flow is simple. It scans the page, generates configuration, target the selected web part, and apply CSS-based motions when they enter the viewport. Now let's move from the technical flow to the actual configuration experience. So before switching to the live demo, this slide summarizes what the page author can configure. So AnimPage Motion is configured directly from the SPFx property pane. For each detected web part, the author can enable or disable animation. They can choose the animation type, for example, fade, slide, or fade up soft, fade up strong. They can also configure a delay. This is useful when you want the section to appear progressively instead of everything animating at the same time. It would be useful. Another option is the animation mode. So the author can choose whether the animation should run only once on the page or whether it should replay every time the user scrolls and the element enters the viewport again on the page. There is also a navigation helper. So when the author clicks the web part name in the property pane, the page scrolls to that web part and highlights it briefly. So if you have many web parts on the page, you can find it easily. So now let's see this directly inside the SharePoint modern page. So here I have a modern SharePoint page with existing web parts. So the goal is to animate some of them without modifying the code or touching those web parts. Let me enter the edit mode. So the web part, it's here. It only displays a small helper in edit mode. For visitor, it does not need visible content. Enter the edit mode. And here, as you can see, so the web part, it detects other web parts, display them here as configurable items. So as I said, if you have many web parts, you can click here on the name of the web part and it will scroll to it like this. So let's try to animate this web part, the document library I have here. So first I will have to activate the animation for that web part. Then after that, I will have to choose, let's choose the cut pop, for example, on every scroll, it's fine, and let's set the delay. So here, as you can see, when I scroll back to that web part, it plays the animation. Add another one, for example, here. Fade up to export. And as you can see, the animation are played. So now that we have seen the live behavior, let us quickly look at the technical stack used to build this sample. So the sample uses the modern SPFx stack. It was built with SPFx 1.22.1 and Node 22. UI part uses React 17 TypeScript. For SharePoint page access, I use PMPGS 4, especially to load and inspect the modern client-side page structure. The animation layer is essentially lightweight. It relies mainly on CSS animation presets and browser native APIs like intersection observer. The property pane is used to expose configuration to the page author. The build uses F, which is part of the modern SPFx toolchain. The design principle behind the stack is to keep the runtime sample, page scan, property pane, configuration, CSS classes, and viewport observation. AnimPage Motion should remain a small enhancement layer, not a heavy framework on top of SharePoint. Beyond the stack, I also made a few design choices to keep the solution safe and maintainable. So one of the main design choices was to keep the target web parts independent. So AnimPage Motion does not require code changes inside the web part it animates. This is important because real SharePoint pages often contain different types of components, sometimes built by different teams or even started Microsoft web parts. Another design choice was to make the behavior auto-controlled, so the page author decides which web part should be animated and how they should behave. The motion layer is also CSS-based. Instead of heavy runtime logic, the solution mainly relies on lightweight CSS presets and viewport observation. So the behavior is optional by design. Animations are enabled per web part, and each target can have its own delay, replay mode. And finally, motion should guide here, should not distract users. So the page must remain readable and usable even without animation. This is especially important in SharePoint, where accessibility, readability, and also maintainability matter. So building this sample also gave me a few useful lessons. So the first lesson is that SharePoint modern pages are dynamic. As developers, we cannot always assume that the full page structure and DOM are ready immediately when the web part renders. So timing matters. That's why the implementation needs to be careful about when it scans the page and when it applies the animation behavior. The second lesson is that the small UX layer can create a visible difference when it's simple and configurable. Sometimes improving the user experience does not require rebuilding the entire page or replacing existing components. And third lesson is that the motion must remain optional, controlled, and performance conscious. Animation should support the content. They should not distract user or make pages harder to read. And finally, this sample shows that SPFx remains today a powerful way to close real UX gaps in SharePoint and gives developers a controlled way to extend SharePoint pages while staying inside the platform model. That brings me to the end of this presentation. So thank you very much for your time. This sample is available in SPFx PMPDEF samples repository. You can explore the implementation, test the work part, play with it, or adapt the idea for your own SharePoint pages. I will be happy to answer any question or receive feedback from the community. Thank you.